Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode number 31 of the RDO Podcast. As always, you're with the, let's call us the Auto Bros, Alex and Jason Von Cannell. How you going?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. So we've got a couple of things to get into this week. Obviously, the results are in.
Your results are in, yeah?
My results are in. So I took myself to Q-Scan on the Gold Coast for my DXA scan. And
what does DXA stand for?
I wonder if it's on here. I don't know. We'll stick it in the comments. But they call it a DXA scan. It's a body composition scan, is essentially what they're looking for. And we had a couple of people make some guesses on the comments as well, so thank you for your contributions.
Can you remember what your guess was?
Yeah, so my guess was like 20 to 25%.
And what was my guess?
What was your guess?
Over 30.
Yours was over 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the results are in, and I am fat and delusional, is what the numbers state. So, I'll start with, there's a lot of numbers here that I'll run through. There's a lot of bad news, but there's a lot of good news as far as I'm concerned as well. So, total body fat percentage, 34.7%, which is far higher than I assumed it would be, obviously.
That's mid-30s, not even early 30s.
Yeah, that's right. So it's almost 35%.
Yep.
Call it 35% just to make it easy numbers. Now, as far as some of the other stats go...
It was very easy for you to get to those numbers, so they are easy numbers.
Well, I think it's actually taken me years of poor choices to get to these numbers. But look, a couple of things out of this before we go too much further with it. When you get bad news, there's two different ways you can take it. The number one way is you can be disheartened and upset, and I'll be honest with you, I was pretty staggered by that because, again, I've always been an athlete back in the day, and clearly I'm not an athlete now, and I've known that I'm not anywhere near as fit as I used to be, and I know that I'm definitely a lot heavier than I used to be. I honestly had no idea that my body fat percentage was this high. So it was staggering to get the sort of news at the beginning. However, the positive way to look at it is, at least I've actually got the data now. And I've got the data, I've got a benchmark, I've got something that I can actually work off. Because, again, being half delusional in my own brain, for a start, I probably should have done this back in October when we first started the fitness challenge, because I've still lost 5 kilos since October.
Yeah.
So I wonder what it was actually back then too. So I am going to book myself in for another scan in about 3 months' time.
Yep.
And continuously do them every 3 months to make sure what I'm doing is actually having results. So there's a lot of stats they run through here, but they've even got things like your mass in your arms, all that sort of stuff. So one thing I found interesting with my legs. So 3 years ago in February I had ACL surgery, and I'd actually injured myself a year prior to that. So my right leg muscle had completely atrophied during that year that I couldn't use it, essentially. So one of the things I was really happy about is the actual muscle mass in both of my legs is basically the same now, which, there's a 33 gram difference between the two. Yeah. Which is nothing.
Yeah.
So it just shows me that all the rehab work and stuff I've done over the last
You're very dedicated in your rehab.
Yeah, for sure. So that looks like it's been very, very effective, which I'm happy with. Now, look, there's a lot of things in here which they have a thing called a fat mass index, which I think is just, they give you a number, so it's 10.45, if any of you out there actually know what it means. I think that's mainly a number which they use to track your results. So obviously if your fat mass index goes up and down per scan, it's an easy way of tracking it. But I'm holding 35.75 kilos of fat, which is a lot.
Seems like a lot.
It does seem like a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, goal-wise, I'd like to lose at least 10 kilos of that fat. That's sort of my goal.
Okay.
Obviously,
so you want to get your body percentage down to your fat percentage?
Yeah, my body fat percentage down to the
26.
Call it 20. Well, again, realistically, I want to lose 10 kilos of body fat. Whatever my muscles do at the same time will then dictate what the percentage is.
So, to be clear, wouldn't that make your fat percentage 26%?
It depends if my muscle mass goes up or down at the same time. Because if I drop total muscle mass at the same time, my percentage will stay higher.
Then what metric are you chasing?
Lowering body fat. So the way that percentages work...
So the number, okay.
Yes.
So what's the number now?
35.75 kilos of body fat.
Okay, so you want that to be...
So I want that to be 25 kilos.
Okay.
That's my initial goal. And again, at least... Because the problem with the body fat percentage thing is, again, if I lose no fat, but I jack up my muscle mass, my body fat percentage will improve. But I'm still holding 35 kilos of fat. So, and vice versa, if I lose heaps of body fat, but I lose heaps of muscle mass as well, my percentage will stay around the same, because it is a percentage. So, initial goal, if I could lose 10 kilos of body fat, be very, very happy with that. There's a couple of other things in here that I was happy about. So they've got a thing called SMI, which is the Relative Skeletal Muscle Index, which I scored a 9.56. And in the little blurb chart here it says, so the Relative Skeletal Muscle Index is used to assess the relative amount of lean muscle on your arms and legs. This should be above 7.36 for males and above 5.45 for females. So I'm 2.2 points above that, which is a positive thing. So, and I mean, like I have said before, I do feel like I am getting stronger from doing weight training and stuff like that. So that's a good thing. But yeah, basically...
What are some things in there that you don't like?
Obviously, the body fat percentage is one. The total amount of body fat is another one. There's a lot of things in here too about like different types of fat. So like visceral fat mass, I'm holding 2 kilos of visceral fat.
That's the bad stuff.
Yeah, that's the stuff around your abdomen.
Yeah.
Which can have sort of health risks and stuff like that.
I'm worried about that one.
Yeah. There's also, they've got 2 different types of fat, android and gynoid fat. So android is mainly around your lower tummy area, gynoid's more around your hips.
Yeah.
And the android fat, according to this, is the one that is more recognised as an important predictor of potential health risks. Whereas gynoid fat isn't as important, but they do keep a ratio between the 2 percentages, which they say you need to be under a 1.0 to be in the healthy distribution, and I'm a 1.38. So I'm well above, obviously, where that needs to be as well. So, yeah, those are...
Does it have biological age on it?
No. It's got things like resting metabolic rate. So my resting metabolic rate is 1,737 calories a day, which is about 7,200 kilojoules, roughly.
That was surprising when you told me that number, because that sounds like not a whole lot. Like, I feel like you would consume multipliers of that.
Well, of course, because that's if you did nothing for a whole day.
Yeah.
So, and again, like one of the things I think that staggers people when they first get into exercise is how much effort it takes to burn a calorie.
Dude, I was on the freaking assault bike and I had to get to 28 calories in under 2 minutes. I almost died.
Yeah.
And the number was 28.
Yeah.
28 calories.
Yeah, that's right. So...
And like, how many calories are in a coffee?
I think black coffee, there's pretty much nothing.
Well, if there was milk in the coffee.
Oh, there's milk, there's... I don't know. I mean, kilojoules-wise, I think milk's probably got 200 kilojoules in it, so it's probably 40 or 50 calories, roughly. Yeah. And that's the thing, it all adds up. So, obviously, there's a couple of things out of that. Your resting metabolic rate, you can increase by adding muscle mass. So your resting metabolic rate, it basically... so they define it as... resting metabolic rate is an estimate of the calories consumed in your body's resting state. It represents the minimum amount of energy needed to maintain body temperature, heartbeat, and respiratory rate each day. So if you add more muscle mass to your frame, you will increase your resting metabolic rate as well. But yeah, look, you can have a look if you like. Number one thing for me out of all this stuff is to have a starting point. And obviously, it's nice to have this wake-up call while I'm 32 years old and not have this wake-up call when I'm 45 or 50.
So what do you reckon my number's going to look like? So I'm getting mine on Monday.
Yep.
Well, when this comes out, when you're watching this, I'll be getting my scan done. So
it's an interesting question because, again, I was way off what I thought I was going to be. And if you look at simple maths, so my body fat percentage is 35%, and I weigh roughly 100 kilos. So you and I weigh roughly the same amount.
Yep.
I would say I've been probably lifting weights for a little bit longer than you.
Yep.
So I would assume that my percentage of lean mass would be slightly higher than what yours is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I'd probably say 36 or 37%, but I could be dead wrong. And like you were saying, your trainer thinks that you'll be less as well.
Only because we'll see. We'll see. But he thinks we just hold it in different places.
Yeah, okay. And look, that can be a big thing too. Like, obviously, mine might be more evenly dispersed throughout my body, which is, again, because like I was sort of going into this scan thinking, well, I know I've definitely got a gut, but you know, I basically don't hold anything on like my arms. But then when you actually look at the scan, you're like, I do hold stuff in my arms. I do hold fat in my upper thighs and everything too.
Totally, because like if you can't see like the outlines of the muscle,
Yeah.
it's fat.
Yeah. So look, I would encourage anyone out there, get a scan, because it is, number one, it's interesting. Like, it's very, very interesting to get a real picture of where you're at. But number two, you might be unpleasantly surprised like I was, and it might actually be a call to action to make some serious change.
Well, we spoke about it ages ago. You know, I was adamant that I've got body morphia, and you obviously did too.
Yeah.
We looked at ourselves and we thought, you know, killing the game.
Mm-hmm.
No, I knew that I had some physical limitations that I've never had before, so that was a wake-up call for me. But also the look in the mirror thing, I know affects some people differently to others. It didn't affect me.
Right.
But it should. Do you know what I mean? So, we'll see what the scan says.
You
like,
know,
I'm noticing things at the gym, and you know, for a 34-year-old person, it's not the right thing. You know, like doing push-ups, everyone's like, you know, you got to get your nose, what is it, your nose, your nipples, or your dick to the ground. My gut stops it.
Yeah.
Like I get like an inch and a half of leeway because I can get down there.
Yeah, but you got a physical barrier between you and hitting those markers.
Yeah, so look, those things are wake up calls for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Ironically, at the same time as this, so obviously I'm trying to. One of the things I really enjoy about this podcast is the opportunity to be honest with all of you guys, but also to be honest with myself. I think one of the issues that we often have in a Western country is our obesity levels are so high. I look at other people and go, oh, I'm looking all right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
relative to the general population, I look around and I go, those people are fat. I'm not that big, so I must be doing okay.
Dude, go to Japan. You go to Japan, and last time I spent 2 weeks in Japan, and when I got to the airport and saw all the people flying back to Australia, I was like, man, we are bad.
Yeah. Speaking of which, this does have your BMI on it, and my body mass index indicates that I'm 0.5 into the obese category.
0.5 on is that a large number or a small?
So the BMI ranges from a base level of 13 and a max level of 35. So 13 you are grossly underweight, 35 you are grossly obese, so the normal range is 18.5 to a 25, and I'm 30.5 in the obese category, which is 30 to 35.
But that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you are. And I know we've constantly ragged on that BMI index, and I know that it's a contentious point, but even if it's just a guide, it would be right. You know, if we had done a rough BMI check, you would have said that we'll
if I was a professional weightlifter, or if I had been lifting heavy at the gym for a long period of time and had a lot of extra muscle mass, that's where BMI gets thrown out. Because
but the 90% of the population
is not that. Yeah, so you can use it as a general marker.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, to me, that was always just a thing in the back of my mind, because even when I was younger and an athlete, I was still in the overweight category. So I'm like, I'm not overweight, because I used to be strict. Like, I used to be shredded compared to what I am now. So that was where that mentality of fuck BMI came from, you know, back in the day. But again, like, obviously I'm nowhere near even close to that.
It just goes to show you too, there is a mental challenge in health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, this is where I was getting to before. So So yeah, trying to go on this personal development mission with you and with all of you guys, and I appreciate you coming along for the ride. And I hope that some of you go, you know what, I'm going to try to get myself leveled up into the next level at the same time. But I'm trying to start reading more books and all that sort of stuff too. So I've just picked up again the 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson, which I bought, admittedly, couple of years ago. I think it was when it first came out. I can't remember, but it hasn't been out for very long. And I remember reading it back then, and it's a very intellectual book, and that was obviously back when I was selling cars and probably just too mentally engaged in that job.
Yep.
And I remember getting a chapter into it and going, this like my brain can't deal with this stuff right now.
Yep.
So I've picked it up again, and I just picked up 2 nights ago, and I just started reading a chapter a night. And last night I ironically read the chapter, which is chapter 2, which one of the rules is treat yourself as if you're someone worth taking care of.
Right. And
what the chapter talks about is how human beings just we're almost incapable of taking care of ourselves, at least to the level that we would take care of someone else. So to give you an example, he talks about how many people who get, say, prescription medicine from a doctor, so you get sick and you get a prescription and they either don't take the pills at all, they don't even buy the prescription, or they get them and it says, take the whole course. And how many times do you see people who it's like, take the whole course, but they start feeling better, so they're like, I don't need this anymore. So they stop taking them. And they juxtapose that against what people do with, like, the family pet. So say you've got a dog, and the dog has a health issue, and you take that dog to the vet. And the vet goes, here's your prescription, here's the pills, this is what you need to do. And people follow that stuff to the letter.
Yeah, because they can't feel it.
Yeah. So people follow that stuff to the letter when it comes to someone else or a pet.
Sure.
But they don't do that with themselves. And it's just like
Is it like an internal martyrdom as well, where I do everything for everyone else? That's why I'm like this.
Well, I'm not even too sure. Like, I mean, the way that he describes in the book, like, he actually relates it to a lot back to like the Genesis story of man and the Garden of Eden and all that sort of stuff, and some deep-seated guilt that comes from, you know, eating the fruit that you're not supposed to eat. But I think what I find interesting about it is when I was reading through it, I was looking at it and I was like, this is right. Like, this is actually true and correct, because I'm a dog owner, and when I've taken Riley to the vet, I've done everything that the vet's told me to do every single time without fail. Then when it comes to myself, it's like, I know, like, sorry, I'll get to that in a sec. I know exactly what I need to do, I just haven't done it.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it for a long period of time. And also understand that it took me a long time to get this overweight, which means it's going to take me a long time to strip it back again. So that 10 kilo weight loss goal, that's not by the next scan. That's just like, as long as I'm heading towards that 10 kilo fat loss goal on each scan, then I'll be getting happier and happier. And you get into that, I guess, positive feedback cycle where, you know, you make some changes, you do the right things, you get some good results, that spurs you on to keep doing it more and more and more. But it is remarkable how, as human beings, like we are all inherently flawed. Everyone knows that. But our inability to take care of ourselves to the level that we take care of others, I find quite fascinating.
Yeah, I don't feel it as much because I don't have a pet. I don't have a kid. I'm trying to correlate it to something that relates to me. And I can't really. Well, maybe my car is very clean.
If you looked at it from like a.
That it needs.
Well, if you look, well, maybe that's the thing. You service your car to do in the service intervals. When was the last time you went to the doctors for a checkup? That's probably a really good example.
Yeah.
I think another example would be if you put yourself back in the dealership scenario and you had employees working underneath you. You would be checking in with them all the time to make sure they're okay, to make sure they're doing well. What can I do for you to help you thrive in your role? And you'd probably give them advice to do things to further their careers that maybe you potentially wouldn't follow yourself.
But is that because sometimes that stuff's just it's easy to say, but it's harder to do?
I think so. I think a lot of, I mean, how you see it all the time where people don't follow their own advice.
All the time.
All the time. And because you're right, I think it is. It's really easy to say it, but it's difficult to do it. And it's difficult to have the discipline to do the things that you know just need to be done every single day.
So on that, how are you going to get to your target?
It's the main thing's diet. So obviously the main thing's diet. And I've always been an eater, and I've always eaten higher volumes of things than I should do. And again, that probably comes from a learnt habit from when I was literally training every single day, playing sport, plus younger with a faster metabolism. And I've stopped all the active stuff, but I've kept the food stuff. So for me, the big thing is just healthy eating. So
And smaller portions.
And smaller portions.
And less frequent.
Well, eating in line with the activity levels that I plan on doing for the day. So, like we spoke about last week, if you're going to go to the gym and do a big training session, you want to eat something beforehand so you've actually got the energy to get the most out of that session.
For sure.
Whereas, if I know, like for example, last week, so Nate picked up a head cold again. He'd been doing so well, two straight weeks at daycare without getting sick, and I think he's going to come good very, very quickly this time. So that's a positive sign. But there was a day on, I think it might have been Wednesday, where he was just attached to me the entire day. So I could literally do nothing. So on a day like that, where it's just caring for Nate day, eat way less food.
Yeah.
Or probably do some fasting and that sort of thing. Whereas I've got a lot of projects I want to do at home, for example, which is like a lot of yard clearing stuff and that sort of thing. I'll eat more food because my activity level will require some additional energy. But it's just, for me, it's just about being more mindful with my choices every single time. And it'll take a long time before that becomes a habit. But obviously, we mentioned this about Steve Scott's book of the 15 disciplines the other week, where your thoughts become your actions, and then your actions become your habits. So I'm going to have to consciously think about these things for a long, long time until those thoughts powering my actions, and those actions create habits that then, then I can not switch off, but then it will become more subconscious rather than conscious decisions.
Well, I think then you'll be looking for finer adjustments.
Yeah. I'm also increasing my training as well. So again, just trying to do a little bit more and do stuff every single day and not make excuses to not do it.
The excuse thing I think is funny because so my whole thing, not just excuse, but the rewards system that you build in your mind. I'm going to go out for beers and because I worked hard today, so I deserve a beer.
Yeah.
Or I had a bad day, so I deserve a beer.
Yeah.
Or nothing really happened, I should have a beer.
I'll commiserate with a beer.
Yeah. And that's some like neural pathways that need to be regenerated into like real reward.
Yeah, and like, that probably has a biological starting point. Because when you think about it, like, if you were back in a hunter-gatherer society, and if you exerted yourself, it was probably because you were going out hunting for the day. Mm-hmm. And generally, if you were going out hunting, now human beings, we were subsistence hunters. So if people don't know what subsistence hunters means, what we generally did, a lot of animals that we hunted have really good fast twitch muscle fibers. That's why they're so powerful. But we've got more endurance. So we literally just used to follow these animals. And we'd follow them, and we'd follow them, and we'd follow them until they got tired, and they were so tired they couldn't defend themselves. And that's how we actually killed them a lot of the time. So you got to think about that. So what have you done? You've been following an animal, so you're pretty much running a marathon, as well as probably doing some small acts to defend yourself if the animal tries to come back at you, whether it's throwing rocks or sticks or whatever it is. So you run. You do a lot of physical work during the day, and then your reward is you've killed that animal, and now you've got something to eat. So then we nourish ourselves with the reward. And that could be a biological thing, but again, the main difference these days is the level of work that we're actually requiring our body to do before the reward, but also the what the actual reward is. So back in the day, if you're doing all this physical activity to get a high protein, high fat meal, which is nourishing, as opposed to these days where we go, okay, mental stress. I've been sitting in my chair at my office all day, stressing out about all these things, but I got it done in the end of the day. And what's my reward? I'm going to have a 6-pack of beers and a pizza.
Yeah.
And the calorie difference and so. I think there's probably a biological basis for the reward-based system.
I just think it's such an arbitrary line that you can draw yourself, and it can be as little or as much as you think at the time. So that's definitely something that, like, I went out for sushi last night with Tasha, and usually I'd have like 5 plates.
Yep.
But I didn't feel like I needed 5 plates. I had 3.
Yep.
And sort of stopped at 3. Usually I always have a beer with sushi because they go together really, really well. No beer, just water. I have definitely reduced the amount of snacking out of boredom.
Yeah.
Because I found that was a big issue. But now I'm finding I don't need to do that as much. But the more I look at it, the more I focus on it, the more room for opportunity I see. And I look how disciplined Tasha is. Like, she's
for sure.
onto it. Like I could wave a packet of Tim Tams in front of her, and she won't.
Yeah, because again, I think she has been so disciplined for so long. She looks at it the other way now. So she doesn't look at those Tim Tams as a reward. She looks at those as a setback.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And that's about again, thoughts lead to actions, actions lead to habits. Like, it is a rewiring. And if any of you guys have started a new job before where you're doing something different, when you talk about competency scales, you have to go back to being consciously competent every single time. So you've gotten the job because you can do the job, but it's a different thing to what you're doing every single day. So none of the activities are autopilot. Everything is conscious thought, and that's exhausting, right? It's mentally exhausting for people when you have to concentrate on every single thing that you're doing all day, every single day. Whereas if you look at yourself doing that job 12 months later, 80% of the things that you do every day are in autopilot. You're not even thinking about them as you're doing it. So then mentally, you're far less exhausted than you were at the beginning. That's because you're trying to train your brain to do new things and do different things and those pathways that it's already built into it. So again, it is about retraining your brain.
Are there biomarkers for stress that hasn't been realised in the body yet? So I know some people that are working, in my opinion, way too hard.
Yep.
And I can see it in their body, but I'm sure that there's people out there that have such high stress roles that they maybe don't, like, are there markers in place to identify mental stress levels?
Look, I think there would be, but it would be down to things like getting your, I'm sure that you can get checks for this, but like your neurochemicals checked, like your serotonin levels, your dopamine levels, etc., etc. It's one of the things other things that's interesting in the 12 Rules for Life that I was reading is he talks about lobsters, and he goes on this big talk about how lobsters have they've been around for 350 million years, and they've always had a dominance hierarchy, which is similar to what human beings do, in that essentially if you take a whole bunch of lobsters, you put them in a new area, everyone looks around, tries to find the best shelter, the best hunting grounds. The men fight it out for those prime positions, and then basically the women try to pick the strongest mate who's got the access to all the resources. It's again very similar to what you see in human society too. But on the male lobster front, one of the things they found, which is really interesting, is lobsters secrete serotonin just like we do, same chemical. And what they found is if 2 male lobsters fight each other, whoever is the victor actually gets a higher amount of serotonin released every single day. And serotonin means that they're less stressed out, which means and it's like a confidence building chemical. So they walk taller, they're more confident, and statistically speaking, a lobster who has already won a fight is like 90% likely to win his next fight.
Right.
Conversely, the lobster that loses gets a reduced level of serotonin release, which makes them more stressed out. And obviously, if they've lost, it generally means that they've got not access to the good hunting grounds, less resources, and that serotonin means that they actually carry themselves hunched over, defensive all the time.
Right.
So they're actually less likely to even engage in another altercation for better territory, let alone win, which therefore means it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that animal that's already put itself in a weakened state is then going to have access to less resources, less shelter, and live a worse life. And I think that, human beings, we're very, very similar. If you are stressed out, you're probably getting that less serotonin production naturally happening in your system. I think a lot of the reasons why we as human beings reach for vices is to get a dopamine hit in whatever way that we can, because we are stressed out. We're not naturally feeling good about ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look for that dopamine hit in alcohol, in drugs, in getting likes on my social media posts. Yeah. And I'm going to look externally for those dopamine hits to perk my mood back up. Which is, I guess, when I really think about it now. See, I think about, like, Joe Rogan talks about it all the time, where, he'll have guests on and the guests are like, oh, like the comments are saying this, and Joe Rogan just goes, you can't read the comments. Because Joe Rogan's the king dick lobster, right? Joe Rogan's got so much serotonin going through his system, he just carries himself as a strong person every single day. He doesn't care what anyone's saying about him because he understands it for what it is.
I don't think it's not caring. I think it's understanding that, especially the comments thing. It's probably not a great example, only because he's smart enough to realise that only bad things are going to come out of the comments.
Yeah.
So remove himself from that discourse. But I see what you're saying, and I suppose we have that term. Is that not gun shy? Is the term gun shy that we would use where, you've had a crack and it hasn't worked, so you become gun shy?
Yeah. And that's a valid term in many different pursuits.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It is a thing to contemplate. And if you're one of those people that are working yourselves to the grind, and like go and get your health checked out.
Yeah.
Because this is all we've got. This is it.
Yeah.
This body, this mind.
Yeah.
This is it. Until we're implanting our consciousness into robots. And I've seen the robots. They ain't that good. I can dance better than the Boston Dynamics.
I can't.
This may be a cautionary tale to some of the people that potentially aren't showing the signs like we are. We're obviously overweight, so we can physically see it.
Yeah.
It's a marker that is easy to identify. But if you're sitting in an office and you're stressed out all the time, maybe go get yourself checked out and see what the... I'm not saying get out of that job, because that might not be the right thing, but there might be some things that you can do for yourself to optimise that.
Oh, 100%. And look, I've been victim of it. I've been in an office environment that's extremely stressful, and to counteract that, I've reached for vices to make me feel better. I've drank too much alcohol and I've eaten too much fast food.
Yeah.
So, like as much as I say I was staggered about these results, then when I really think back to the last 4 years of my life, I tore my ACL in 2017. So essentially, all physical activity stopped for 12 months, which was the first time in my entire life that I've ever been like that. I got surgery done in 2018 in February, and it was an 18-month rehab to get my knee back to a level where I could just do the basics. Mm-hmm. So I was 18 months behind. So there's 2.5 years I've lost as far as doing actual physical activity goes. You incorporate it at the time, it was mid-2018 was when I started working in Brisbane, and then I was working 10-hour days with a 2 to 3 hour commute total every day. So not only was I having the commute, I was working in a stressful position, I was drinking too much alcohol, which again, a lot of it was, traffic-wise. I knew traffic was going to be bad if I left on time at work, so I'd go to the pub and have a beer before I left home, because I'd get home at the same time. So then I'm having excess calories, and then when I've had a couple of beers and I'm driving home, literally the halfway point is the fast food supercenter in Beenleigh, where it's got Macca's and KFC, and like you can see the KFC bucket from like 10 kilometres down the road. Very effective marketing. And so because you had a couple of drinks, you make worse decisions, and you're like, oh, yeah, I want that. And then, so when you actually look back at my last 4 years of my life, it was completely unsurprising that I've ended up in this position.
I suppose the vice thing is interesting. Like, maybe you need to take a step out of your life and go and look at it and say, is this thing helping or hindering?
Yep.
Because you can make all the excuses in the world in the moment why it's helping.
Yep.
I deserve this, I need it, it's been a rough day. But is it actually going to help you?
Yeah.
And I'm the same. Like
it's the difficult thing with having a salesperson's brain, is we can justify anything, and we generally do it most to ourselves.
Yeah, but I actually wonder what it's like to be in a non-salesperson's brain, because I'm sure they can do it too. I'm sure they can convince themselves that whatever they want is what they want, and what, I think that's probably a very common human trait.
For sure.
The easiest person to fool is yourself.
Yeah, agreed.
Because, if you lust after something, you'll figure out an excuse to have it.
That's right.
So, I do want people to consider that, because, we're two examples of people who have done it to a pretty bad degree, and we want to get better. And if you're younger than us, well, you've got a massive advantage.
For sure.
If you never get into it in the first place, you won't be in this situation.
And again, it's that funny thing, isn't it? When I was 20 years old, people would come along and tell me, one day your metabolism's going to slow down, you're going to get fat, and I'm like, never going to happen to me.
Yeah.
I would have people tell me, you can't play sports in the manner that you do because one day you'll start getting injuries. Never going to happen to me. You had people trying to talk to you about things like buying property, investing. Yeah, whatever. Like, that's long-term stuff. Who cares? I'm living in the moment, son.
That's one thing I got on early.
Right?
But all the other stuff I agree with.
Yeah. But it's that whole thing of, I guess, your... especially being a bloke, because I only know what my existence was like being a bloke. I don't know what it's like being a girl. But I know that when I was 18, 19, 20, I mentioned it last week, testosterone peaked. So I was interested in one thing only. And that was competing for mates.
Yeah.
Pretty much. That's what I was interested in. And that was like, it was kind of like, not tunnel vision, because I was like doing work and stuff like that as well.
It was tunnel vision. It was tunnel.
It was my primary concern
ambition.
in life. Yeah. But again, it's like I'd put all the stuff to the wayside because I was literally thinking about the day to day, and I'm like, that stuff's that's future Jason's problem. It's never going to happen to me. So I'm just not going to worry about it. But then I go, okay, now I'm only 12 years older than I was back when I was 20. These are all the things I've learned in the last 12 years. So for any of you who are still 20 who are listening to this, apply some of these things now, because think about, you're going to be 12 years in front of me when you're 32.
Ahead.
But the other thing too is also, it's never too late to start.
Yeah, you got to start. Yeah.
And
what's that saying? Best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago. Second best time is now.
Yep, 100%. So that's the whole thing. For me, while these numbers are a little bit staggering for me, it's a baseline, and now I actually know where I'm going. It's like having a map. Like, beforehand, I was trying to navigate without having a map. Now I've got a map. Now I've got real data to go off. So again, the lies that I was telling myself before was that I wasn't losing any more weight because I was putting muscle on. Well, those lies no longer exist now. I removed that mental blockage.
I think I've noticed that you've also changed your tune a little bit just in the last couple of days since the previous conversation that we'd had during the week, which was you used to set targets for yourself and specific deadlines, just like on this weight loss challenge, the previous weight loss challenge that we had here. And we'd kind of spoken about how it shouldn't be putting an end date on it. Puts an end date on it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the way your brain is geared to achieve objectives is great, except for the fact after that, you no longer need to achieve.
I can fall off the wagon again.
Yeah. Well, because the race is run.
That's right.
So, but you actually haven't mentioned it now, which makes me think you've thought about it.
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot
over that time.
Yeah.
And that's this weight loss thing. And I don't know if you remember when you tried to bet me, or you wanted to have a comp, and I was like, no, because this is my own
yeah,
race,
it's for you.
right?
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do is the everyday now. So every day is that choice the right choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the only way that I succeed in my target.
100%. And this is true for literally everything that happens in life. Is the only thing you can control is yourself.
Yep.
So, like, I made all these excuses about working too much. Well, guess what? I was choosing to work too much.
Mm-hmm.
That was on me. I made those choices. And then I was just trying to use those as a justification afterwards. Well, no, like, that wasn't forced on me. That was a choice. I made those choices. So, when there are days when, life will throw a curveball at you, which could be any number of things. COVID last year, pretty good example. Everyone probably had plans rolling into 2020, which were kind of blown up by a curveball. But again, you had two different ways of looking at that. And if you got put in like COVID lockdown, for example, I think some of the population's like, I'm going to use this opportunity to get fit. Some of the other people in the population have gone, I'm just going to sit on the couch, watch Netflix and eat chips. There's always two different ways that you can look at things. So for me, it's number one, stop lying to myself about the decisions that I'm making, and therefore stop justifying them to other people as well at the same time. But two, it's just, again, like you said, there's no end date on this for me now.
This is life.
Which is why I'm loath to put a target on how much
deadline.
fat I'm going to lose by when or anything like that. Like realistically, I want to get the scans done every 3 months just to make sure I'm still on the right track and to keep me accountable as well. Because accountability is a real big problem for people too. Jocko Willink's got his book Discipline Equals Freedom. And a lot of people, like, that kind of doesn't look right because you think discipline, it's like, so Jocko gets
doing
up.
what you're told.
Yeah, doing what you're told and everything. But it's like, what the point of the book is if you've got enough personal discipline to do the right things the majority of the time, you're actually going to have a much better life than if you don't do the disciplined thing now. By the time I'm 50, I'll be obese and can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's where I admire Tasha so much, is that she's so dedicated. She's got so much discipline in whatever she does, whether it be her the gym, her diet, her work. She's 100% focused. Now, I realise that when I try to show her a funny cat video on YouTube while she's working, and I get zoned out, that's because she's doing a good thing.
Because she's in the zone, doing something that's constructive.
You mentioned something that I want to talk about. You mentioned that 2020 kind of kicked us in the balls.
Yeah.
Okay. When GFC happened, 2008, there was a lot of really, really, really bad press.
Yeah.
Okay. I was selling cars at the time on the Gold Coast, and our boss at the time had decided that we were going to grow in that time. We had a strategy of how we were going to grow, and we did.
Right.
Grew as a team, grew the numbers, really embraced it. I want to actually know, I don't think these negatives exist. Parts of them exist. I think the words that people use like media will say, everyone's this all bad, all this stuff is evil, rah, rah, rah. What made me realise about what's happening from 2020 and into 21? Went for a motorbike ride with a friend. Go out to a place in Canungra, Cafe Mets. Shout out to Cafe Mets in Canungra. The best biker breakfast that you can have. You sit down, in 2 minutes your coffee's there, in 4 minutes your food's there. It's consistent.
Nice.
It's great. It's well priced, and it's in and out. It's just made for bikers. And I've been going there for 10 or 12 years. Okay, over the years, going for motorbike rides out there. And I distinctly remember the kinds of bikes that I would see out there back then, 10 years ago, say.
Yep.
And 10 years ago, I would say, let's say 20% of the bikes that were around were the top of the range, expensive, show pony, well, like real high-end machines. Then there was some mid-range, but predominantly it was a lot of cheap stuff that people had cobbled together and you know, were riding around. When I went there last weekend, it was completely flipped. 80% of the bikes that were there were the top of the range, latest, you know, and even the ordinary stuff was just older but special.
Right.
And that to me really made me realise how affluent, at least this area has become.
Mm-hmm.
Because the value of those bikes is exponentially more expensive than what it was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I think, okay, I look at my network, because we had conversations during the week. You can hear stuff from the media, but I try to translate it to what I can see in my real life.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people that have lost jobs. Most of those people have got other jobs, and some of them have chosen not to go back to jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anyone that's lost a business. I don't know, like, I can't correlate any of this supposed heartache or financial crisis into reality. Now, sorry, except for the fact I drive past the Virgin building in Brisbane and it's closed. So that, those, don't get me wrong, it's not all like that. The travel sector has been absolutely decimated.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people that have made a lot of money. A lot of the businesses that I deal with, they've said that their customers are spending more money than they've ever spent before. A lot of you know, construction workers or landscapers, or you know, they've got more work than they've ever had before.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a whole range of factors. You know, can't travel.
Definitely
you know,
depends on the sector that you're working in, for sure.
Yeah, but I don't want to get caught in the mentality that 2020 kicked us in the nuts, when it, from what I can see, unless you're in travel, it didn't.
Look, so there's probably a couple of things out of this. Number one, 2020 was a swerve. Whether it kicked you in the nuts or not is dependent on the way that you took it.
Mm-hmm.
So we said before, the number one thing, the only thing that you can control is yourself.
Yeah.
So if you were in a position where you potentially lost your job, how you responded to that is probably that dictates whether or not you think 2020 was a positive or a negative. I mean, even for me, the amount of pressure that got ramped up at work when COVID hit was actually the thing that convinced me to leave my job.
Mm-hmm.
Because pressure and workload went up, pay went down, I've got a child at home, this is not worth it. It was the kick in the ass I needed to actually make the decision that, you know, maybe I should have made it sooner. I don't know.
Same with me. I started my business in that time.
So there's, because obviously we, you know, it came, the changes came through, and we looked at it a certain way, and we made moves that have ended up making ourselves happier because we controlled ourselves and how we responded to it. So with the bike analogy, like I can see where you're coming from. What I would say is that, is it only people who can afford expensive bikes who can afford to go out for breakfast now as well? You know, is it the same people that you've seen at the cafe 10 years ago that now have better bikes?
Well, no,
or is it only that the people who can afford the cocked bikes can actually afford to go out for breakfast now too?
There were more bikes than I've ever seen, and look, you could say that population growth does that. So more bikes, and I did question myself: is it just old money? Because the old money has got vastly more valuable over that time.
Yeah.
Anyone that's invested properties, whatever, is far richer. But I'm just talking even the P-plate bikes. The P-plate bikes are the $8,000 bikes. Yeah. Whereas back when I had P-plates, it was like $2,000 or $3,000 bikes.
Yeah. I do think that's a mentality thing too. I think these days people are more willing to take on more debt to get what they want sooner rather than 10 years ago. I feel.
But I don't know if that's the case, because I remember
I feel it's the case because
I was selling cars then, and my finance penetration was higher then than what it has been.
Yeah, but that's
recently.
just down to the fact that you could get literally anyone approved back then, which is different now. I think the rise of social media and the pose factor has made people buy more expensive things to show off to other people these days than what they did 10 years ago.
I don't think that's changed in 10 years.
I think it has. We can disagree on that. I think it definitely has.
But I was selling cars 10 years, 15, 17 years ago, and that show pony mentality has never changed. It's always been the same.
No, I don't think so.
Especially
I think it's worse now. I think people are more vain now than they were 10 years ago because of social media.
But can you correlate that to anything? Because I know the customers I was dealing with were still buying show pony cars that they couldn't afford back then to what they are.
Yeah, I think there's those people still, and I think there's more now, which is probably what you're seeing with P-platers buying really expensive bikes. And I think I
think that's an easy thing to say, but it's a hard thing to actually back up.
Okay, well, we'd have to have a look at things like household debt numbers. If household debt numbers have gone up, then that would be incorrect.
Well, no, because
if people have taken on more debt and simultaneously have more impressive things to show off to people, then I would say that people are more willing to go into debt to project an image than they were 10 years ago. But again, we don't have the stats here or anything like that. But getting back to the point, so I think that you are right. I think there was a lot of good that came out of last year if you're willing to look for it. There was also a lot of bad that came out of last year if you're willing to look for it.
Yeah.
And the big key difference is that the media and social media was only trying to show the bad, which is why I think you're right. There's probably an imbalance between what people's perception of 2020 was and what the reality was, heavily slanted in the negative favour, because that's what's filled your airwaves every single day.
Yeah, and that's why I want to correct the way we speak about it.
Yeah.
Because
language is very important.
It didn't kick us in the balls. It did us. It was hard for months, right? But we've been through rough patches of months in the past before.
Yeah.
But we don't refer back to 2017. July 2017 was rough. I don't want to get caught in the 2020 was a formative year.
It's also difficult for us to comment, being that we lived in Queensland the whole time. If we lived in a state that had lockdowns, we would possibly be speaking differently about it.
Sure.
Especially if you were in a state that maybe had lockdowns, where maybe you had just started a business within the last 6 months when it happened, you were forced to lock down and you didn't qualify for government assistance. Those sorts of scenarios obviously those people would have a very different perspective of what happened.
For sure.
We've been largely the beneficiaries of living in Queensland, where it's it's almost been life as usual. Like you said, it was like probably 3 months at the beginning where everyone freaked out and we didn't know what it was, and everyone changed everything. But then it's what
I'm saying is we need to appreciate that.
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I absolutely appreciate that. What I'm saying is I wouldn't apply that appreciation to everyone else who was in worse circumstances than what we were, because we were quite gifted. I mean, I've got a mate who lives in Scotland at the moment. He's been on lockdown since October.
Yeah.
I think they're allowed to leave the house for an hour a day or something like that. His particular line of work...
Scotland, you don't want to be outside.
I think that being inside for that length of time...
Jokes.
Yeah. His line of work has basically been decimated for the last 3 months. So...
For sure. But for every one example of where that stuff has been really bad, if you looked for it, you could find an example where someone has thrived or has benefited from.
Yeah, of course you could. But again, it comes down to what you choose to look at as a person, and you should be trying to look for the positives. But you need to be mindful of the negatives too. Be mindful of the negatives, but choose to actually take a positive course of action when they come up, rather than pretending that there was no negatives.
I'm not saying there was no negatives. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, though, we're carrying this mentality that it was all bad, and that's just not true.
I don't think we are.
That's what the media does. Well,
I know,
but even in your wording to start this conversation was about how bad 2020 was.
I said it through a curveball at us. Yeah.
You didn't say curveball. You would have to go back.
Okay.
But that's the common mentalities. People will say that. They'll all say that. Oh, it sucked. And rah, rah, rah. That's what I want. I want us to check ourselves with that attitude, because it's not that constructive. it creates an excuse, like we talked about, our vice excuses. It creates an excuse for not achieving some things that we probably could have achieved. And if you're not looking for the silver linings, you're not going to find them.
Oh, of course. And again, like, I absolutely no disagreement on that. But at the same time, like I said, you do need to have some empathy for the people who have been in far worse positions because of what happened last year, which is a lot of people. So, and again, for the people even who have had the bad things happen, like family members pass away or businesses closed or whatever that is, as harsh as it sounds, at the end of the day, you're where you're at, so you need to choose to take a positive out of it.
You got to deal with
that's right, because regardless of how bad your lot in life is, if you choose to respond to it negatively, you're going to make it worse.
Yeah.
If you choose to respond to it positively, you're going to make it better.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I see what you're saying in that you don't want to focus on and dwell on the negative and use it to, like, worrying too much about the past and all the negative things that happened in the past. All you're doing is you're spoiling your present, which is today.
Yeah.
And every day that you pick you dwell on something negative today, you just ruin another day. Whereas
exactly. Our attitude towards 2008 GFC is that it absolutely decimated the world. And in reality, here in Australia, it did not. It was far from it. And a lot of people made a lot of money on the way through. And a lot of people made a lot of positive lifestyle change because of that. But I almost feel like, in this interaction here, that I'm getting a negative stigma for even considering that. Because it sounds like I haven't been empathetic to the people that did struggle. But that's the issue that I'm saying.
Yeah.
There is talk, and then there is the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with what you're saying. You need to make whatever situation you're in, you need to deal with it. But I don't want to broad brush all this negative stuff when, in reality, it wasn't.
But again, you're speaking from someone who's had a pretty positive response to it. So you're saying you don't want to broad brush all the negative stuff, but I feel at the same time you're somewhat broad brushing all the positive stuff at the same time.
Yeah, because no one's broad brushing the positive, and that's
because it doesn't sell. Because it doesn't sell.
Yeah, but I want to raise it because I want to check people when they're saying, oh yeah, 2020 that was really hard, but was it? Is my question. Was it really?
So someone goes, I lost my family member and my business closed down because the government forced me to shut down. What would you say to them?
Yeah, different story, but if someone said I started a business and employed 20 people and...
Exactly. So again, you're saying you don't want to broad brush negative? I get it. You don't want to dwell on the past. That's cool. That makes perfect sense.
It's not dwell on it. I don't want to dwell on the on a theme that was created at the time to sell media.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to taint your outlook. Like brown tinted glasses, sharp tinted glasses. Ask yourself what it was like for you, not what people said, but what it is for you.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you've just gone to the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario did happen, for sure.
Yeah.
But is it all the worst case scenario?
No, it's not. But it's not all the best case scenario either.
No, it's not. But we never talk about the good things that came out of those bad times.
Well, we've absolutely spoken about the good things that have happened out of those times.
But generally we don't. Generally we say that 2020 was hard.
Well, no, because I've only spoken positively about 2020 for me, because it was one of the best years of my life. Like, I had the birth of my first son. Yep. I made a decision to leave work. I've been the happiest I've ever been is what I am now because of things that happened in 2020. So for me, it was largely a positive year. But I can completely empathise with people who have not had the same level of positivity. And I understand that you want to bring more positive discourse out there, and that is a positive thing, because at the end of the day, the media sells negativity, and that's why there's such a negative slant in everything that we consume every single day, because that's what brings eyes and brings attention. And you're right, it's influencing people to have a more negative view of 2020 than potentially they need to have, because you're right, they could be looking at what happened to everyone else, but them individually, they've actually done very, very well out of it. But yet they still got a negative kind of negative feeling from it. So what you're really
you've just
saying,
done it to me. I've talked about the positive things, and then you've balanced it out by death and destruction. But that's what you just did is exactly what I'm trying to illustrate. Is that businesses come and go all the time. People die all the time. There's life, think about all the people that have had babies. There's both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you try to stigmatise my attitude of the positive things that have come out by balancing it out with the bad stuff.
Yeah, because it's about balance.
Yeah, but
there's positives and negatives.
But the media is only talking about the
I know,
negatives.
and I've never said that they're not.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that in reality, there was good things that happened out of 2020. There was bad things that happened out of 2020. There is a balance. So you need to speak of it as a balance as well. Because if you don't, and you just talk about all the positives, you're just as bad as the media. You're just on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
So it is about balance. But again, I think what this all really comes down to is individual responsibility and how you respond to whatever cards are thrown on your table. And we've got a choice. We've all got a choice. And it's, okay, these are cards that have been dealt to me. What can I do to make the best out of this? Or what can I do to make the worst out of this? And I guess you have to look at that in every facet of your life, every single time it happens. Plus, at the same time, again, what you're advocating for is be mindful of the media that you consume. Because I do find it. If I go through cycles where I watch a lot of news or I go on too much social media, I feel negative.
Yeah.
Because it's all negative stuff.
It's by design, yeah.
That's right. And it is by design because, again, we have a negativity bias as human beings. We look at things that we think are going to harm us. And that just gets jammed down our throat all day, every single day, because we have a 24-hour news cycle. So you do need to check yourself and pull yourself out of it and go, okay, there's a lot of bad things happening to a lot of people that are out there, but they're not actually happening to me.
Or your network, or your direct network.
And if they are, instead of going, woe is me, all these bad things are happening, what can I actually do to help someone who is in my network that I know a bad thing has happened to? Because I don't think the majority of people who, are taking in all this negativity, who then have a friend that they know is in a really bad spot because of maybe losing a business or something, who are picking up the phone going, what can I do to help out? And you'll even find that more fulfilling in yourself, where if you can help someone who has fallen on tough times because of something that was out of their control, you'll feel better about yourself too.
I just remember having conversations with people during GFC when they were freaking out that the mantra was, everyone's losing their homes.
Yeah.
And then I asked these people, who do you know that's lost their homes? And sometimes they could cite some examples.
Yeah.
Investment properties.
Yeah.
Investment properties that they should never have had because it was a property bubble.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And some of them made money on the way through, just not as much as they would have liked. And there's just that real... I think the best way to correlate to what you're saying is to ask, what's it done to me?
Yep.
And what's it done to the people that I can physically see? I get like direct 2-degree of separation network.
Yeah.
Because I think that story will be very different to the story you're being told.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, you need to... It comes back to... instead of, when you're listening to anything, and this includes our podcast as well, when you're listening to any form of media, if someone's gone public to say something, generally there is an agenda that they're trying to achieve by saying that thing. The news is no longer about just reporting the news. It is not, this is what happened today, good and bad. It is fear, 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 fear.
So they can sell toilet paper.
So they can sell something. So they can sell a product, generally. It is, even just the sheer fact that you tune into the news and they've got they run ads. It is designed to hold your attention for as long as it possibly can, so they can sell your product. So you need to be mindful of those things. And it's something that I used to teach young salespeople when they're trying to sell a car to a customer, is when a customer says something to you, don't think so much about what they're saying to you. Think about why they're saying it. So the best example in sales is always if you go to approach someone on the floor and say, hey, how are you going? Is there anything I can do to help you? And they go, no, just looking, thanks. They're not just looking. They're usually there to buy a vehicle, but that just looking, thanks is a wall that they put up, which is a natural reaction, because I do it myself. Even if I'm going out to look at electronics or clothes or something I'm out of my comfort zone in, if someone comes and asks to help me, I still have the natural reaction to go, no, I'm just looking,
I'm
thanks.
the total opposite.
Yeah, okay. So
I go seek someone out. Hey, can you help me?
yeah, so I'll seek someone out if I sort of have a bit of a general idea of what I want to look at and I want more information. But oftentimes, if I know nothing, I'll automatically do that. No, just looking, thanks. And again, it's a defense mechanism, right? Because it's like me inherently, like human beings, we don't want to look like we're dumb. We don't look like we're idiots. So anyway, getting back to the point, the I'm just looking, thanks doesn't actually mean I'm just looking, thanks. It means I actually really need help, and if you press a little bit harder, and you make me feel comfortable, I'll open up to you and I'll talk to you about it. Well, consuming media is the exact same thing. It's not, the headline of, this. I'll give you a really good recent example. I turned on ABC News and I hear Australian Attorney General denies raping a teenage girl. That was the headline. So again, if I took that at face value, I'm like, shit, this guy's recently raped a teenage girl. And then when you actually delve into the story, it's the thing that happened back in 1988, and he was a teenager himself at the time, etc., etc. But again, that headline was designed to capture my attention, and it did, right? It did make me go, shit, that's
full on, yeah.
That's full on. So it worked. But again, you've got to understand the why around the message, not the what of the message. Because I think too often people take the what at face value when it's got actually nothing to do with the why. And then that what, because they take it at face value, they then spread it to all their friends too.
Exactly.
And so everyone all falls into the same trap.
Everyone gets the striking headline.
That's right.
And then your opinion on the headline.
Yeah.
Which isn't based on the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
hence the reason why online discourse sucks.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. Don't you feel like that whole Australian news, Facebook, Google thing, that's even out of the media already? Like, that's just disappeared and nothing's really changed at all?
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Interesting. But, look, all right, so to summarise the lessons from today. Number one, I'm fat and delusional. Well, sorry, I'm fat, but I'm not delusional anymore.
Put in the comments what you think my DEXA scans.
Yeah, so Alex will be getting his done on Monday, which will share the results next week. So I've got a target of where I want to hit. But out of that, be mindful of your own health, and if you haven't had a checkup, if you haven't had a scan, if you're concerned about it at all, I would encourage you to go and do it, because whether it's good news or bad news, you might be surprised by the results. You might go and you might get...
You might be too huge.
Well, you might get confirmation that everything you're doing is perfect.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
In that case, keep going. That's really, really good. In my case, it's broke, so I've got to fix it. So that's one thing. Second thing is, again, no matter what your lot in life and whether something's been thrown on your table, which again could be an opportunity, not just a negative, how you approach that curveball is largely going to dictate as to whether or not it ends up being a positive or being a negative experience for you. It is on you. And I guess thirdly is, don't listen to the media. Listen to the why, not the what.
Yep.
What are they trying to sell me? Why are they trying to tell me these particular things?
Yep.
What's the angle that they're going with? Play chess with the media because they're playing chess with you.
Yep.
And that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next RDO.